First, find your place of rest. Settle into the surface that supports you, whether it is your bed, your chair, or the floor. Allow your body to feel its own weight, to release its hold. And now, let us connect our breaths, no matter how many miles lie between us. Take a slow, gentle breath in through your nose, filling your belly, your ribs, your chest. Just a quiet, easy breath. And now, let it go with a soft sigh, releasing the day that is past. Let's do that once more. A slow breath in, gathering the present moment, and a long breath out, letting go of all that came before. I wonder where you are right now as you listen to my voice. What does the air feel like in your room? Is the night silent? Or can you hear the gentle sounds of the world outside? Just take a moment to be right where you are. You are safe. You are exactly where you need to be. Now let the noise of the world fade and let the story begin. In a small village called Sumana, nestled in the plains near the great city of Savatthi, there lived a woman named Elara. Elara was not a princess or a scholar. She was a weaver, but her skill was a form of magic. Her loom was not merely a tool of wood and twine. It was a storyteller. With threads dyed from marigold, indigo, and madder root, she wove tapestries that captured the crimson of a sunset, the deep green of the monsoon forest, the shimmering silver of a fish leaping from the river. People said that to look upon Elara's work was to feel the coolness of a breeze or the warmth of the sun. She was admired, respected, and most of all, she was relied upon. Elara was the one you went to. If you needed a wedding sari of unparalleled beauty, you went to Elara. If you needed a sturdy cloak to ward off the winter chill, you went to Elara. If you needed a burial shroud woven with love and dignity, you went to Elara. And because her heart was as soft as the finest cotton she spun, she never said no. Her loom was always busy, its rhythmic clack-clack a constant heartbeat in her small home. But there was another loom, inside her mind, that was never, ever still. While her hands worked, her mind wove endless threads of worry and responsibility. It wove the thread of her aging mother's persistent cough and the herbs she needed to buy from the market. It wove the thread of her younger brother's debt to a stern-faced moneylender. It wove the thread of a promise to a neighbor to help mend their roof before the rains came. It wove the thread of a merchant's impatient demand for an order to be finished ahead of schedule. Each request, each need, each worry from those around her was a new thread, and she dutifully, automatically added it to the ever-growing tapestry in her mind. This mental tapestry was not beautiful like the ones on her physical loom. It was a tangled, heavy, and chaotic mass of obligations, its colors murky with anxiety.
Elara's days were a blur of doing, of providing, of weaving for others. But her nights were the true torment. When she lay down on her mat, the clack-clack of her physical loom would cease, but the loom of her mind would work faster, its shuttles flying frantically in the darkness. She would lie with her eyes wide open, her body aching with fatigue, but her mind would be planning, worrying, and list-making. Tomorrow I must rise before dawn to finish the merchant's cloth. Then I must take the soup to mother. I must remember to speak to my brother. Did I forget to add the blue border to the wedding sari? The bride will be so disappointed. I am so tired. I must get some sleep. But if I sleep, when will I worry about the roof? Her own needs, her own exhaustion, her own quiet desires were like a single pale thread, lost and buried under the thick, demanding colors of everyone else's. She walked through her days feeling as though she were wearing a heavy, invisible cloak. its weight pressing down on her shoulders, a constant tension in her neck. One afternoon, the weight became unbearable. The sun was hot, the air thick with dust. The merchant had sent a boy to her home for the third time that day, asking if his order was ready. Her mother had sent word that she felt weaker. A neighbor had just stopped by, asking if Elara could just weave a small piece for her daughter's doll, a tiny favor that would only take a moment. Elara stood at her loom, her hands moving automatically, but her mind was screaming. The threads on the loom blurred before her eyes. The vibrant colors seemed to mock her with their beauty. She felt a wave of dizziness, and her hand fumbled, dropping a heavy wooden shuttle. It hit the packed earth floor with a dull, final thud. And in the sudden silence, something inside Elara broke. It was not a loud shatter, but a quiet, deep crack in the very foundation of her being. She looked at her hands, at the threads, at the half-finished tapestry, and she felt nothing. No joy, no pride, no purpose. Only a vast grey emptiness. Without a conscious thought, she turned and walked away from the loom. She walked out of her small home, past the questioning look of the neighbor, past the waiting merchant's boy. She didn't know where she was going. She was just walking, propelled by a desperate need to escape the noise, the needs, the endless, relentless weaving. Her feet, acting on some instinct older than thought, carried her away from the village towards the cool green expanse of the Jetavana monastery, a place she had heard was a sanctuary of quiet. She was not seeking a teacher or a miracle. She was a wounded animal seeking a dark, quiet cave in which to hide.
She walked through the monastery gates and into a world of profound stillness. The air itself seemed to move more slowly here. The sounds of the village were replaced by the gentle whisper of wind in the bamboo leaves and the distant melodic chanting of monks. She wandered off the main path, deep into a grove of Bodhi trees, their heart-shaped leaves rustling a lullaby. She found a large, smooth stone at the base of an ancient tree and sank down onto it, finally letting the heavy, invisible cloak of her responsibilities slide from her shoulders. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she was not doing anything for anyone. She was just being. And in that stillness, the tears she had held back for so long began to flow. They were silent tears of pure exhaustion, of a soul that had carried too much for too long. She did not know how long she sat there, lost in her quiet grief. When she finally looked up, her eyes blurry, she realized she was not alone. Seated a short distance away under another tree was a man in a simple saffron robe. He was not looking at her, but his presence was as vast and as peaceful as the sky. It was the Buddha. Elara's heart seized with a fresh wave of anxiety and shame. She felt she was intruding, that her small, mundane sorrows were a stain on the perfect peace of this sacred place. She began to gather herself, to stand up and flee back into the shadows. But before she could move, he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it carried across the space between them as clearly as a temple bell. He did not turn to look at her, but she knew the words were for her. "The strongest threads," he said calmly, as if continuing a conversation they had already been having, "are often the first to snap when a tapestry is woven too tightly." Elara froze. The words went straight to the heart of her, a perfect description of the cracking she had felt within her own soul. He had seen it. He had seen her. He had not seen the reliable weaver, the strong daughter, the helpful neighbor. He had seen the thread that was about to snap. And in that moment of being so completely and compassionately seen, she felt the first flicker of a possibility she had long forgotten, the possibility of rest. And as Elara sits there, frozen in a moment of profound recognition, I invite you to feel that same recognition. Feel the weight you have been carrying, the endless lists, the worries, the needs of others. And just for this moment, as you lie here listening, give yourself permission to set it all down. Let the heavy cloak slide from your shoulders. You do not need to carry it into your sleep. Here in this quiet space, you are allowed to be just you, without your responsibilities. Just rest. The story of what happens next will wait. For now, there is only this peace, this release, this quiet invitation to let go. The Buddha's words hung in the still air, not as an accusation, but as a gentle, observable truth. Elara remained seated on the stone, her intention to flee forgotten. Her tears had stopped, replaced by a deep, listening stillness. She felt as though the rustling Bodhi leaves and the quiet earth were all listening with her. After a long, comfortable silence, the Buddha spoke again, his gaze still directed towards the horizon, allowing her the comfort of not being watched directly. "Tell me, Weaver," he said, his voice imbued with a soft curiosity. "When you weave your beautiful tapestries, what is the first thread you put upon the loom?" The question was simple, practical. It was from her world, and it grounded her. She thought for a moment, picturing the familiar process. "The warp threads, Venerable Sir," she replied, her voice soft but clear. "The strong vertical threads that run the length of the loom. They are the foundation. They must be strung first, held under tension, so that the other threads have something to hold on to." "Exactly," the Buddha affirmed. "They are the foundation. They bear the tension for the entire creation. And what happens if you neglect these foundation threads? If you do not give them space, or if you pull the other threads, the colorful weft threads, too tightly against them? Day after day, piece after piece." Elara's own experience gave her the answer. "They fray," she whispered. "Over time they weaken, and eventually they snap. And when the foundation snaps, the entire tapestry, no matter how beautiful the colors, unravels into a useless tangle of string." She stopped, and the weight of her own words settled upon her. She was the warp thread. She had been holding the tension for her family, her village, her clients for so long. And the other threads, the weft, the favors, the worries, the obligations, had been pulled tighter and tighter, with no space, no rest, until she, the foundation, was about to unravel. "You have given your strength to be the foundation for everyone around you," the Buddha continued, his voice resonating with deep empathy. "This is an act of great compassion. But you have forgotten that the weaver, too, has a duty to the warp threads. A wise weaver knows when to let the tension ease. She knows that space, emptiness, is just as important as the thread itself. The pattern is created not just by the color, but by the space between the colors. Without that space, there is no pattern, only a chaotic block of color." He finally turned his head and looked at her, and his eyes held no pity, only a profound and respectful understanding. "You have forgotten to weave space into your own life, Elara. You have forgotten to tend to your own foundation." The truth of it was so simple, so obvious. She felt a fresh wave of emotion, but this time it was not despair. It was the heart-aching release of being finally understood, most of all, by herself. "But how?" she asked, the question that had haunted her sleepless nights. "If I let the tension ease, everything will fall apart. My mother's health, my brother's debt, the merchant's order, they all depend on my strength. If I create space for myself, I am being selfish. I am abandoning them." "Look at this tree," the Buddha said.
gesturing to the ancient Bodhi tree whose roots cradled the very stone she sat upon. Its roots run deep, holding it firm, much like your own sense of responsibility. Its branches reach high, providing shade and shelter for many weary travelers, for the birds that nest in its leaves, for the small creatures that hide among its roots. It gives and gives and gives. But what does it do for itself? Elara looked at the great tree. She saw the way its leaves turned towards the sun, drinking in the light. She saw how its roots drew water from the deep hidden wells of the earth. She realized it was in a constant quiet state of receiving. It takes in sunlight, she said, and water. Precisely, said the Buddha. It nourishes itself, not out of selfishness, but out of wisdom. It understands that it cannot provide shelter if its own branches are withered. It cannot stand strong if its own roots are dry. To nourish itself is not to abandon its duty, it is to make itself capable of fulfilling its duty. To weave space into your life is not selfish, Elara. It is the most compassionate thing you can do, both for yourself and for all those you wish to support. A snapped thread can hold no one. Then he guided her in a way she had never expected. He did not give her a list of commands. He asked her, "When you lie down at night and the loom of your mind begins its frantic work, what do you do?" I try to solve it," she confessed. "I plan the next day. I count the coins I need. I worry about what I have forgotten. I try to weave it all into a perfect plan." "You are trying to weave in the dark," he said with a gentle smile, "and with threads of smoke. It is an impossible task. Tonight, when you lie down, I invite you to try something different. Do not try to solve anything. Do not try to plan. Do not even try to sleep. Your only task is this: become a listener." "A listener?" she asked, confused. "Yes. Lie down and simply listen to the sounds around you. The chirp of a cricket, the rustle of a leaf, the sound of your own breathing. Do not name them. Do not judge them as good or bad sounds. Just let them be waves of sound washing over you. Then listen to your own body. Listen to the feeling of the mat beneath you. Listen to the gentle hum of tiredness in your limbs. Again, do not judge it, just feel it. And when the thoughts come, the worries, the plans, the endless threads, treat them as sounds too. A thought about your mother is just a mother thought sound. A thought about the merchant is just a merchant thought sound. You do not need to engage with them. You do not need to weave them. You are just the listener, the quiet, spacious awareness in which all these sounds, from the outside world and the inside world, are allowed to arise and pass away."
The idea was so radical, it frightened her. To do nothing? To just listen? It felt like a dereliction of her duty. But the exhaustion in her soul was a more powerful force than her fear. She was desperate enough to try anything. She sat in silence for a long time, absorbing his words, letting them sink into her like rain into dry earth. Finally, she stood up and bowed deeply, her heart filled not with a solution, but with a possibility of space. She walked back to her village as the sun was setting, casting the world in hues of orange and purple that she would normally be mentally cataloging for a new tapestry. But tonight, she just watched the colors, allowing their beauty to wash over her without needing to capture or use it. When she arrived at her home, she did not go to her loom. The half-finished tapestry sat there, waiting, but she let it wait. She ate a small meal of rice and lentils and for the first time, she tasted it. She tasted the earthiness of the lentils, the subtle sweetness of the rice. She was just eating, not eating while planning or eating while worrying, just eating. Then she prepared for bed. As she lay down on her mat, the familiar tension began to coil in her stomach. The loom of her mind began to whir, the shuttle loaded with the thread of the angry merchant. Her first instinct was to grab the thread and start weaving a plan, an apology, a solution. But then she remembered the Buddha's words, "Become a listener." She let go of the thread, she closed her eyes, and she listened. At first, all she could hear was the pounding of her own anxious heart. But she just listened to it. Ba-boom, ba-boom, a sound. She didn't try to slow it. She just listened. Then she heard a dog barking far away, a sound. She heard the tiny skittering of a gecko on the wall, a sound. She brought her attention to her body. She felt the weariness in her shoulders, not as a problem to be solved, but just as a sensation, a warmth, a heaviness. She listened to the feeling. Then the thoughts came, crashing in. The merchant, he will be furious. He will ruin your reputation. Instead of following the story, she tried the Buddha's technique. She mentally labeled it, worry sound. She let it be a noise, a vibration in her mind, and then she returned her attention to the sound of her own breath. In and out. Another thought came. Mother's cough. It sounded worse today. She labeled it mother thought sound. She did not push it away. She simply let it pass, like a cloud obscuring the moon for a moment before drifting on. It was not easy. The habit of a lifetime of worry was strong. The mental loom wanted to work. But Elara, with a gentle, patient firmness, kept returning to her role as the listener, listening to the night, listening to her body, listening to her breath. Over and over, she gently unhooked herself from the stories and simply rested in the spaciousness of awareness. She did not know when it happened. There was no clear line. But at some point, in the quiet space between one breath and the next, between one distant cricket sound and the next thought sound, she did not just find rest. Rest found her. She slipped into a sleep so deep and dreamless, it was like falling into a quiet, bottomless well of pure peace. She, the weaver, had finally allowed herself to unravel into the bliss of utter stillness.
Elara awoke not to a sound, but to a feeling. It was a feeling of lightness, as if the heavy, invisible cloak she had worn for years had been lifted from her in the night. The morning light filtering through the small window of her hut seemed brighter, the air fresher. For a moment she lay still, simply savoring the absence of the familiar morning dread, the immediate onslaught of the day's obligations. The loom of her mind was quiet, its threads still, its great wooden frame resting in the dawn. The deep restorative sleep had been like a balm, soothing the frayed edges of her very soul. It was a peace she had thought was lost to her forever. Then, slowly, awareness of the world returned. The thought arose, not with its usual panicked sharpness, but as a simple fact: the merchant's tapestry. Today was the day she had promised it. A flicker of the old anxiety, a phantom pain sparked within her. She felt her muscles begin to tense, her breath shorten. The wild elephant was beginning to stir in the clearing, but something was different. She had a rope now. She did not leap from her mat and rush to the loom. She remained where she was, closed her eyes, and remembered the Buddha's words. Become a listener. She listened to the quickening beat of her heart, anxiety sound. She felt the tension in her shoulders, fear, sensation. She didn't fight them, she didn't judge herself for feeling them. She just noticed them, as a traveler might notice a cloud in the sky. And then, with gentle intention, she guided her attention back to her anchor, the breath. She took a slow, deep breath, feeling her belly rise, and a long, complete breath out, feeling her body soften and sink deeper into the mat. She did this 3 times. The anxiety did not vanish entirely, but it lost its power. It was no longer a roaring fire consuming her. It was a small, distant campfire she could observe without being burned. The elephant had settled. Only then did she rise. She moved with a calm deliberation that was new to her. She lit her small cooking fire, not with a mind already racing ahead to the loom, but with her attention on the spark, the feel of the wood, the growing warmth. She prepared a simple gruel, and as she ate, she tasted it, just as she had the night before. This was her first act of weaving space into her day, a few moments of nourishing her own foundation before she began to weave for others. When she finally turned to the loom, she looked at the half-finished tapestry with new eyes. She saw not just the merchant's demands, but the beauty of the colors, the skill in her own hands. She sat down, took another centering breath, and began to work. Her hands moved with their old skill, but with a new rhythm. It was a rhythm guided not by panicked haste, but by the steady, peaceful cadence of her own breathing. Clack, clack, inhale. Clack, clack, exhale. The loom was no longer a place of torment, but a place of moving meditation.
When a thought of the merchant's anger arose, she noticed it, worry sound, and gently returned her focus to the feeling of the thread passing through her fingers. When a thought about her mother's cough arose, she noticed it, mother thought sound, and returned to the sight of the vibrant indigo color she was weaving. She was not ignoring her responsibilities. She was simply choosing not to be consumed by them while she worked. She was doing one thing at a time, weaving. The past was gone. The future had not yet arrived. There was only this single thread, in this single moment. She worked this way through the morning, and a strange thing happened. Without the constant inner friction of anxiety and mental multitasking, her work was faster, more fluid. Her movements were more precise. The patterns seemed to emerge from the loom with a grace and life she had not seen in her work for years. The peace she was cultivating in her mind was flowing directly into the threads. Just before noon, the tapestry was finished. She cut it from the loom, her hands steady. It was beautiful, perhaps the most beautiful she had ever made. The colors were vibrant, the pattern flawless in its execution. But its beauty was no longer a source of anxious pride. It was simply the result of a morning's peaceful work. Now came the next test, facing the merchant. She wrapped the cloth carefully and set out for the main market. As she walked, she practiced being the listener. She heard the sounds of the village. She felt the warmth of the sun on her skin. She kept her anchor in the present moment. She found the merchant, a portly man named Kuru, at his stall, surrounded by silks and spices. His face was stormy. "You are late, weaver," he boomed, his voice attracting the attention of other nearby shoppers. "I have clients waiting. My reputation suffers when my artisans are unreliable." The public criticism was like a sharp stone thrown at her. The old Elara would have shrunk, apologized profusely, and felt a hot flush of shame that would have ruined her day. The new Elara felt the sting, yes. She listened to the shame sound in her mind, the heart-pounding sensation in her chest. She took a quiet breath, and then she responded not from a place of fear, but from a place of calm truth. She bowed her head respectfully. "My apologies for the delay, Lord Kuru," she said, her voice even and clear. "The work required a certain peace of mind to be completed to the standard you deserve. It is ready now." Her calmness was disarming. Kuru had been ready for an argument, for excuses. He was not ready for quiet dignity. She unwrapped the tapestry. As the cloth was unfurled, a collective gasp went through the small crowd that had gathered. The colors were so alive, the craftsmanship so exquisite, it seemed to vibrate with an inner light. It was leagues beyond what she had ever produced before. Kuru's stormy face slackened, his mouth slightly agape. He ran his hand over the fabric, feeling its texture, his expert eyes tracing the intricate patterns. He was silent for a long moment.
"This is," he began, his voice losing its booming quality. "This is mastery." He looked from the tapestry to Elara, and his gaze was different. He saw not just a tardy artisan, but a true artist. "Whatever peace of mind you required," he said, his voice now low and respectful, "it was worth the wait." He paid her the agreed-upon price without another word of complaint, his eyes still fixed on the luminous cloth. As Elara walked away, coins in her purse, a new feeling arose in her. It was not the frantic relief of having dodged a scolding. It was a quiet, solid sense of self-respect. She had not been thrown off balance by another's anger. She had remained in her own center. She had tended to her own foundation, and because of that, she had not only survived the encounter, she had thrived. Her next stop was the market stall that sold medicinal herbs. With a portion of the merchant's money, she bought the rare roots her mother needed for her cough, something she had been worrying about for weeks. The transaction was simple, but for Elara it was profound. She was not acting out of a sense of panicked duty, but from a place of calm, loving action. She had created the space, done the work, and now she could provide, not from a place of depletion, but from a place of fullness. On her way home, she saw her younger brother, looking thin and worried, walking down a lane. The brother worry sound arose in her mind. Her old pattern would have been to rush to him, to take on his burden, to promise money she did not have. Instead, she took a breath. She remembered the Buddha's words about the tree. She could offer shelter, but she could not be the soil for him. He had to find his own roots. She approached him calmly. "Brother," she said, her voice kind but firm, "I see the worry in your eyes." He immediately began his tale of woe, the money-lender's threats, his bad luck. Elara listened. She truly listened, not with a mind already calculating how she could fix it, but with an open heart, simply hearing his pain. She was the listener for him, just as she had been for herself. When he was finished, she did not offer to pay his debt. She placed a hand on his arm. "I cannot carry this burden for you," she said softly. "It is too heavy for me, and it would not help you learn to walk on your own. But I am your sister, and I will not abandon you. I will stand with you. I will go with you to speak to the moneylender. I will help you find extra work. I will offer you shelter, but I will not carry you." The words were perhaps the hardest she had ever had to say. They felt selfish, but as she spoke them, she felt a surge, not of guilt, but of strength. She was defining the edges of her own tapestry. She was protecting her foundation. Her brother looked at her, surprised. He had expected either a handout or a scolding. He received neither. He received something more valuable, her steadfast presence, but not her enabling. He saw the strength in her, and it reflected a potential strength in himself. He nodded slowly, a new resolve dawning in his own eyes. Elara finally returned to her small home as evening approached. It had been a full day, a challenging day, but as she entered her quiet space, she did not feel drained, depleted,
or broken as she normally would. She felt whole. She had met anger with calm. She had met need with mindful action. She had met dependency with loving boundaries. She had woven space into the fabric of her day. As she lay down on her mat that night, the loom of her mind was quiet. The threads of the day were not a tangled mess, but a finished, orderly pattern. She listened to the gentle sounds of the night, to the steady rhythm of her own breathing. There was no struggle, there was no fight. There was only a quiet, vast, and welcoming peace. She had learned that her strength came not from weaving endlessly, but from knowing when to pause. Her value came not from never saying no, but from the wisdom of her yes. And her peace came not from a perfect, problem-free life, but from her ability to be the calm, listening space in which the imperfect, messy, beautiful threads of life could be woven. And in that quiet, knowing peace, she closed her eyes and let the gentle tide of sleep carry her away. And now, you too can let that tide carry you. You have faced the day. You have met its challenges. Now is the time for space. Now is the time to nourish your foundation. Let go of the threads of doing and simply rest in being. Be the listener. Be the quiet space. Let the gentle waves of my voice and the rhythm of your own breath guide you home, to the deep, silent, healing harbor of sleep. Rest now. You have earned it. Rest deeply.